Hi, in this video you will learn how to build a simple spelling app in Flutter, the same one you see on screen, where the user tries to spell a word from a set of scrambled letters. So this video will use a heap of basic concepts in Flutter, like how to implement draggable widgets, state management using provider, how to add images, animation, audio and more. I will start from scratch and go through step by step and keep a fairly steady pace, so this video is best suited for people who are already comfortable with the programming basics. Okay, cool, so let's start. Alright, so on screen here I just have the example code when you start a new Flutter project. First thing I'm going to do is remove most of this, everything from my home page down. I'm going to remove that, clear out here, remove this comment here, update the title to spelling bee, which is the name of the project, and now I'm going to create a new home page. And I'm going to put that in a new file. So over here on lib, new Dart file, home page, first letter in lowercase. And in this new file, I'll type stful tab, which is a shortcut for a new stateful widget. Right click, import the material library. Back in main, I will then reference this new library. Now I will run a hot reload and we'll see that the screen is now returning a blank container. If we have a problem with the data flowing through with the state of the application, I'll use hot restart instead. Next thing is I want to import some font to use throughout this project. So first thing is I need to put the font asset into the project. So I'm going to come up here to the root of the project, go new, create a new directory, name this assets. In here I'll create a subdirectory, I will name this fonts, and then I'll paste in the asset. Cool, so that is now in the project. Next thing is I need to update pubspec.yaml, so anytime add any assets like fonts or images or packages, need to also update pubspec.yaml. So I'm scrolling down to the bottom here, gives you an example of how to import font. I'll select this, control / to uncomment it out. In pubspec.yaml, need to make sure the indentation is correct. It should be 2 across, so 1, 2, bring these back 1, you can remove this here. I'll give it a name, party confetti, and now I need to make sure this path matches the path of where I've put the asset. So assets, fonts, party confetti. Okay, so after I've done that, I need to run pub-get, so I'll click up here. So anytime pubspec file has been updated, need to run pub-get. Cool, so back in the main now, get dependencies. Now that I've imported the font, I now want to set a text theme that I can use throughout the project. So anywhere in the project I can grab this text and apply it. So I can do that in the theme data widget in the material app. I'll come down here, I'll type T and then use a text theme. Here I want to put the text theme against headline 1, I could also put it against headline 2 and so on, but we just want one variation in this project. And then I'm going to use the text style widget to customize the text. So first of all, apply the font we just imported. So I'll reference that name that I put earlier, party confetti, the font size 60, font weight, I want it to be a little bit thicker, so I'm going to select font weight bold and a font color of white. Okay, cool. Now it's giving me a warning here. Let's check it out. Right click, show context actions, and it's recommending I add the const modifier because this does not need to change here, so we can set this in stone. Alright, so we've got the text theme now set up. Next thing is I just want to remove that little debug banner in the top right of the device. So I'm going to type D and select debug show check mode banner, and I will set this to false. And if I hot reload here, we'll see that has disappeared. The next thing I want to do is start building out our UI layout. To do that, I'll go to homepage. I will first replace the container with a column which takes in a list of children. The first child I'll give it is a container. I will give it the color of red. Here we need to give this container some size because we're putting it in a column. Also the same is true with a row, and it has no child widget. In this case, rather than giving it explicit height and width, I will right click, wrap with widget and type expanded. And the expanded will force its child to fill up all the available space or divide that space proportionally among multiple children. I'm going to copy this and paste it a few times, so we have 5 in total, and now I'm going to update the color. I'm just putting in some placeholder colors. Okay, now if I hot reload now, you'll see that the device has been perfectly divided into 5 vertically. I want the sections to be different sizes, so I want some to be either bigger or smaller. To do that, I can use the flex property in the expanded. So the first one, I'm going to give a flex value of 2. I'll give all the middle ones a flex value of 3, and the last one I will give a flex value of 1. So the way the flex values work is it's going to take the total, so 5, 8, 11, 12, and then each one will be divided by the total. For example, the bottom one will be 1/12 of the total. So let's hot restart. It's cool, so we can see the changes there, we can see the sizes have adjusted proportionally, and that's looking good. Okay, next thing is I want to move this UI down outside of that top part of the device with the notifications and time and other things like that. So to do that, I'll go to column and I'll wrap this in a safe area. Now if I hot reload, we'll see that the UI has been pushed down outside of that top part. The next part is I want to display a word on screen, and that'll be out of a list of total words. So each time one word will be displayed. So the first thing I want to do is create a list of all the words. To do that, I will go to lib, new, Dart file, and I'll call this all words. And I want it to be a list of words, so I'll type list of string, and I will call this all words. And I'm going to fill it up with a bunch of animal words. And I also want this list to be set in stone. I do not want it to change, so I'm going to add the const keyword to do that. Now I want to come back to the home page and I want to create a private list. And this list will be able to change. We want this list to be able to shrink over time. As a word is spelled successfully, it should be removed from the list. So I will type in list of type string. I will name this words. I will use the underscore to indicate that it's a private variable. We do not need it throughout the project. Write all words for that list that we just created, import that library, and then use the toList method. This will put everything from this list into this private list here. Next up is I want to create a private string, and that'll just hold the word that's chosen. String, and I'll just call this word. But it's given me a red line because it's saying this is not a nullable type. So if I do that, that makes it a nullable type, which means it can hold a value of nothing. But in this case, we don't want that. So to get around this, one way is I can add the late keyword, which will say, hey, we're not going to give this a value where we've declared it, but we will do that before it's used at runtime. And if we forget to do that, it'll throw an exception. But we're going to do that right down here in the init state, which is a method on the state class, which will run only once. And this is a good place to initialize variables like here, or other things like listeners. So let's initialize this here. Now I want to choose the word randomly to give a bit of a random element to the game. So I can do that by using the random class. I need to import the Dart math library, and on the random class I can use the next int method that'll randomly generate an integer up to a maximum, and the maximum will be the number of items in that list. And then let's return that into a variable. Now we can use that variable to select from that list. So we can go words at the index of whatever that integer is. And then we can say word will be assigned that value. For example, if that returns the random integer of 1, that will go 0, 1, so pig, and then pig will be put in that variable. Now let's test that by running a print function, and we'll print out word. I will do a hot restart. Cool, so we have fox. Let's run that again. Awesome, and now we have cat. So we're randomly generating a word. So what I would like to do now is map the letters of that word out onto the screen. And I want to do that in the yellow container. So instead of using a column which lays out its children vertically, I'm going to use a row which will lay out its children horizontally. And this time, instead of writing in the children one by one, I'm going to map them out. So to do that, I'm going to use a map function. I will write word.characters, I'll access the characters property, and now I'll call the map function. So the map function is going to iterate through each of these characters in this word, and for each one it's going to call a function which returns a widget, And in this case, we want the widget that it returns to be a text. And in that text, we want to display the character that was just iterated over. But you can see there's a red line under here indicating an error. To fix that, at the very end, we can write .toList, which will return a list of widgets and prompt this to run. Now, if we do a hot reload, cool, we can see cat has now been printed in the bottom left part of the screen. But let's make this look a little bit nicer. So first of all, I want to update the alignment of it. Main axis alignment in the row widget and select space evenly. Now if I hot reload, we can see cat has been spaced out nice and evenly. I want to apply the text theme. So I'm going to use the style in text, and here I will use theme of context, text theme, headline 1. And that will allow me to grab that text theme. Cool, so now if I hot reload, we have cat. Cool, and it's showing in our text theme and it's spaced out nice and evenly. Next thing is, I want these letters to be shuffled, to be scrambled, so the game is a little bit more challenging. So one way I can do that is by going ... and then calling the shuffle method, and that ... is the cascade notation, which allows us to call another operation on the same object. So we're calling the shuffle method on the list object here. So if I do a hot reload, we can see it shuffled. Now this might cause some issues later on. If this build method runs again, it will call the shuffle. So to avoid any potential issues later on in this project, I'm going to shuffle the list before we pass it in. I can't shuffle a string, but I can shuffle a list. So I'll first return this into a list, and now I can use the cascade notation, and I can call shuffle. So I'll store this in a temporary variable, and now I just need to convert this back to a string, and to do that I'll use the join method. Okay, so now we've got the word shuffled, and that'll now pass into here. So if I hot restart, cool, we can see Fox has popped up and the letters have been shuffled. Next up is I want to also display the same word in the blue area, and this will be in the correct order. So I'm going to create another variable named drop word, and this will simply just be the same value as word but before it's shuffled. And now I will basically do exactly the same as before. I'll use the row widget and I'll map out the characters. So drop word, access the characters property, map them out, and return a text that displays the character that was iterated over. I'll apply the text theme by using the theme of. I need to call toList to get this to work, and I want to have the same alignment. Run this. Alright, awesome. So we have cat up the top in order, and then we have cat down the bottom all mixed up. Next up is I want to refactor out these text widgets into their own standalone widget. That will stop this code from sprawling out too much, but more importantly it's going to help keep it modularized, which will help with when we turn these into draggable widgets very shortly. So to refactor them out, I am going to select refactor, extract Flutter widget, and I'll call this one drag. And now I need to pass in the character, so I will go, it can be final. So final string letter, and then I'll make it a required parameter up here, required this dot letter. Cool, so that's passed in, and I need to just update this to letter. And now I need to pass in the argument. That is done. I also want to keep this in its own file. Drag, paste that in, again import the material, and reference this here. Alright, that's done, and I'm going to pretty much do the same thing up here. Refactor, extract Flutter widget. This one instead will be called drop. Again, we need to pass in the character, final string letter, and make it required, and use the this keyword and reference it here. Cool, pass that in, and again let's put this in its own file. New Dart file, drop, paste that in, import the material, and reference that here. Right click, import. Okay, awesome. So we're now displaying the words we want to, and we've put them into their own widgets. So now this is very easy to turn them into draggables, which we'll do right now. So first of all, I'm going to go to the drag file. I'm going to select text, right click, show context actions, wrap with widget, and wrap with a draggable. First thing is I need to add in a feedback. In this instance, I'm going to return the text because I don't want this to change at the moment. And now if I hot reload, cool, we can now drag the letters across the screen. Alright, awesome. The next part of the puzzle is we need these letters to be able to communicate with the drag target. So the drag target can say, hey, yep, we'll accept you, or no, want to reject you. To do that, we'll use some data in the draggable. If I come here, use data, and we can now pass us some data that will help us communicate with the drag target. So the data we want to pass in is the letter, which is of type string, into this part here. So we'll just type letter. So for example, this could either be a C, T, or A. Now let's use that to communicate with our drag targets. I'll go to the drop file, right click text, and I'm going to wrap that firstly in a drag target. Now I need to update this to a builder method with a context and candidate data, rejected data. And first of all, I'm going to place this text in here. So I'll return this text. So I'll use the return keyword. Cool. Okay, so this builder method will allow us to rebuild the UI of this widget based on its interactions with a draggable. So here I can select some property methods. First one I'll select is onWillAccept, and this has a function that takes in data, and that's the data of the draggable that's dragged across it, and we either need to return true or false here to indicate whether we have accepted it or rejected it. Let's go if the data is the same as the data that was originally passed into this widget, then we want to return true, else we would return false. And let's test this by putting in some print functions. So print accepted, print rejected, and now we can test this. So if I pick up the C, we've got accepted, on the A it's rejected, and the T it's rejected. Cool, so this is now working. Next thing is I want to only have this run if the draggable widget is actually dropped on top of it, not if it's just dragged across it. So to do that, I'm going to also use the onAccept, and this also takes in some data, and here I can create bool just turns true when we accept whatever's dropped on top of it. So we'll set that to false. However, if we drop something on top of it, I can then go accepted is equal to true, and here I can update the builder method. So I can say if accepted, then return this text, else return a container. We'll give it a color, so a color of amber, and I'll just throw in some height and width. Let's test it. So let's put the T on the T, and great, so the T has been accepted. We could also use candidate data. So if I put that in there, candidate data dot contains, and if this contains the letter, let's hot reload, and that works, but that works if we drag it across. So I only want this to work if it drops, hence I'm just going to use that variable. Cool, so we now have a drag target communicating and updating based on its interactions with the draggable. Now I want these draggables to look a little bit nicer, so I'm going to go back to our drag. First thing is when we pick up a letter, I don't want anything left behind because that doesn't give the illusion that we're just picking up one letter. So here I'm going to come down into draggable and use child when dragging. And I'm just going to return a size box, so we don't want anything in this case. So now if I pick up a letter, I'll pick up T, cool, so we don't have anything left behind. The next thing is when we pick up a letter, I want the appearance that we're actually picking up something. So to do that, I'm going to add a shadow to the draggable when it's picked up. I'll come to feedback, and I'll update the theme that we passed in this specific spot. I will use the copy with method, and this will allow us to amend this text theme just here. Now we have an error, so I need to add the null operator, and here I can use shadows, which will taken a list of shadow, so we'll give it a shadow. We'll have offset, return offset. I'll put 3 on the X and Y. Color, colors.black, use with opacity, pass in 0.4, and give it some blur radius, put in 5. Alright, so let's update that. Cool, so we're now seeing a shadow under the letters when we drag them. One small issue though is that these letters are reappearing after we've successfully dropped them on their drag target. So we can fix that by coming up here and using onDragEnd, and this will pass in some details, which is the details of the draggable that we've picked up, and we can say if details dot was accepted, then we know that this was accepted. We don't want to show it anymore down here. And in this case we don't have a builder method to update, but what we can do instead is convert this from a stateless widget into a stateful widget, and this will allow us to call setState, which will rerun the build method here, and we can update the UI. To do that, I'm going to create a variable, a bool called accepted, that'll start out false. However, if this widget is accepted, then we can turn that to true, and then let's run setState. Now that that's turned true, we can update here, and I'm going to update it by using the ternary operator. I'll go accepted, question mark, size box, colon. So this is saying if this is true, it's basically an if statement. If this is true, whatever's immediately after this question mark will return. If this is false, instead what's after this colon will return. And here is where we turn it true. Okay, so let's test that. We'll do a hot restart. So we've got pick up C and drop C, and cool, we're not seeing it reappear down here. One final tweak, however, is when we pick up the letters are shuffling around a little bit. I can stop that by wrapping them in a box with a fixed height and width. So let's do that. First of all, I want the size to be proportional to the screen we're working on. So I'm going to grab the size first. I'll come here and I'll use media query to do that. So I'll go media query.of context and select size, and I'll return that into a variable. Here I will wrap right at the top a size box. Width, I will put size.width times 0.15, height size.height times 0.15. Cool, so if I pick up a letter, you can see there is no movement. However, these are aligned in the top left. So let's fix that by making the child a center widget. And cool, now we can see that these are now aligned center. Awesome. So let's apply the same solution on the drop. So we'll use the same dimensions here. First of all, I'll grab the size using media query.of size, return that into a variable, final size equals that, wrap this in a size box and make the child a center. So let's pick up a letter. So these draggables are working well. The drag target's able to communicate with the draggable, and they're giving the appearance of being picked up and dragged with a shadow. Alright, awesome. So we have our draggables working. The next part of this project is I want to implement a state management solution. Specifically, I want to be able to track the key data in this game, how many letters are being answered, how many words are being answered, and to allow the user to press a button to generate a new word or to restart the game. In this project, I want to use the provider package, which is going to allow us to manage the key data in the game to be able to access it and manipulate it throughout the whole project. So first step is to import provider into the project. First I'll search provider on pub.dev, go to installing, grab the dependency here, and now I need to add it to pubspec.yaml. So I'll come up here, add it under dependencies, paste it in here, and then run pubget. Now I want to set up a class with a change notifier that can work with provider to notify other widgets when there's been updates in the key data that we want to track. To do that, I'll go to lib new Dart file. I'm going to call this controller, class controller, and I'm going to extend a change notifier. and that's going to allow us to call notify listeners, which will notify our listeners when we have changes in the key data that we're tracking. Now I want to set up our provider. I'm going to go to main, right at the top of our widget tree, right at the root of the application. I'm going to go to my app, show context actions, wrap with widget, and wrap with a change notify provider in the provider package. And next up, I'm going to create the object that will be exposed to the whole widget tree, so we can read and manipulate these values inside of this object. So to do that, I'm going to write in the controller class is the class that's going to hold all our important information. So I need to import the library. Cool, so now we have our provider set up. Now let's put in some of those key variables that we care about. We need to know the total number of letters in the selected word. So I'll go int total letters, and initially I'll set that to 0. And now let's create a method to work with that, and I'll call that setup, and that'll take a required parameter int total, and here I will set total letters equal to what's passed in, and now I can call the notify listeners method to notify our listeners. So now let's test that. I'm going to do a print function to see the outcome. Total letters, and right, total letters here. Now let's call that from where we create a word, which is in our home page, and here I can write provider of, I can use the static method on the provider, or import provider package of context. I need to pass in the type, which is controller, and import that library. Now I can access any of those property or methods. So the one we care about is setup, and then I'll pass in word.length. Now a couple of things is, firstly, we're calling this in the init state, and at that point in time we do not have an instance of a build context, so that would throw an exception. To avoid that, I can write widgets binding.instance add postframe callback, which will call at the end of the frame, and at that point in time we will have an instance of a build context. And I'm just going to put a null operator there. Put this in here. Cool. And the next thing is, we only want to read the values, so I'm going to set listen to false, otherwise that may throw an exception also. Cool, so now we should be able to, when this runs, call this method and pass in the total number of letters. So let's do a hot restart and see that in action. Cool, total letters 3, and we have cat. Awesome, so now we have the foundation of our state management solution in place. Let's build on it. So let's go back to controller. The other thing we care about is letters answered at any given point in time. So we can go letters answered and also set that to 0, and create another method called increment letters. So each time a letter is successfully answered, we want to increase that by 1. So we go letters answered plus plus, and here I will write notify listeners, and I'm going to put another print function in to test this, and we'll write letters answered question mark and put in letters answered. Now we need to find a good place to call this method. We could do that from either the drag or drop widgets. I'm going to call this from the drag, and here when we know it was accepted, I can use provider, the static of context, import provider, pass in the controller here, import that. Now I can call increment letters, and again need to put listen to false. Alright, so that should now increment by 1 every time a letter is successfully answered. So let's run that. So I pick up C. Cool. We're now able to track how many letters are being answered. So let's go back to the controller, and we can build on that with some simple logic. So we know if the total letters answered is equal to the total letters in the word, then the word has been answered. So we can do a print function here saying word completed. I'll put in T, and word is completed. Now the next step is, when a word is successfully completed, I want a message box to appear to say, yeah, hey, congratulations, and let the user press a button to generate a new word. The next step is to create a message box. I'm going to use that using an AlertDialog, which is a built-in widget in Flutter. So first of all, I'm going to go to lib, new, Dart file. I'll call this message box, And in here I'm going to type STL and create a stateless widget. Call this message box. Import the material. Now I'm going to return an alert dialog. So let's update this. First of all, I'll put in a heading, and this will say well done, and we can put in some actions. So a list of actions, we just want one, and that'll be an elevated button. So here, when it's pressed, it'll call this anonymous function, and in here we can just write at the moment generate word, and we'll have the button display new word. So we have a basic alert dialog set up. We now need a way to call this, and we can do that by using a helper method called show dialog, and we'll call that from in here at this point. So we can go show dialog, and we need to put in a builder, and we just want to return the dialog here. So I'm going to use the arrow syntax and write message box, import that. Now we have one small issue, and that is we need a context, but we're not in a state for a stateless widget, so we don't have one. But we can get around that by, in the increment letters method, we can say, hey, whoever calls me need to give me a build context. So let's go required build context, and that'll solve that. And then back here, this is where we do have an instance of a build context, so we can just pass it in here, and that solves that problem. So let's test it. I'm going to click restart. C-A-T. Awesome. So we've got word completed, and our alert dialog has popped up on screen saying well done. And if we click new word, it's printing out generate word. Now that alert dialog is looking a bit boring, so let's make it fit the style of the project. I'll go back to alert dialog, and the first thing is I want the text to have the text theme we created. So I go style, theme of context, text theme, headline 1, and we'll also apply that to the button. Now if I do a hot reload, cool, so we have the text theme applied. Next thing is I want that button text to be a little bit smaller, so again I'm going to use the copy width, and the font size I'll change to 30, and I'll just put this null operator here. Alright, awesome, update that. Now we should center that, so I'm going to come over here, use actions alignment, use main axis alignment, and center that. Next up, we can't see the title because that's the same color as the background, so let's update the background color, colors.amber, update that. Cool, so we've got text now clearly visible. Next up, I want to put rounded corners on the box just to make it look a little bit cooler. So to do that, I'm going to go shape in the alert dialog and use the rounded rectangle border, and here I'm going to pass in border radius dot circular and pass in 60. Now if I hot reload, cool, we can see the corners look a little bit nicer. And let's do the same thing by rounding the corners on the button. So firstly I need to go style, elevated button, and use the static style from method. Now I can just copy in that same code, hot restart, and cool, we now have rounded corners. And final touch is I'm going to select the text and put it in some padding. Alright, awesome, so we now have an alert dialog popping up when we want. Okay, next up, so if I press here, we can see that the button disappears, and we don't want that because that'll muck up with the logic that we've got. I'm just going to remove that print function. So to fix that, we can go to the alert dialog method and use barrier dismissible and pass in false. And next time we try and click outside of that box, it won't dismiss. Alright, so next stage is we want to be able to generate a new word. So to do that, I'm going to create another variable up here of type bool, and this will be called generate word, and I'll set this to false initially. And down here we'll put a method to work with it called request word, and this will take in a bool called request, and we can say generate word will be set to whatever our request is, and then also to notify our listeners. So if we call this method and pass in true, this will turn true. So we want to call this when we press that button on the message box. So let's go back to our message box. Here on our onPressed, we can write provider of, so use the provider library, import that, pass in the controller, the object we care about, import that library too, and now we can select request word and pass in true, write listen false here. Alright, so when we press a button, provider will call this method, which will update this to true and notify whoever's listening. Okay, so let's do that part now. So we'll go to home page, and we want the home page to be able to update. So here we have the code that generates a new word. So first of all, we want to call this multiple times. So I'm going to put this in its own method called generate word. Paste this in here, and now we can call this whenever we need to generate a new word, not just in the init state. Okay, there's a couple ways we could call that with provider. We could use the provider of and put that in the didChangeDependencies method in the state class. We could also use the consumer class, but in this case I want to use the selector class. So to do that, I will come to safe area, and I'm going to wrap the top here with a selector, and I'm using selector because it's going to allow us just to focus on the variables that we care about. So I don't want to listen to all the changes, just the variable we care about, and that's that variable generate word. Otherwise we'll have this build context potentially building when we don't want it to. So now I need to pass in the types that we care about, and that's that controller object, and also bool, because the variable we care about is generate word, and that is a bool. To select that variable, I'll use selector, and I don't care about the context, so I'm just doing an underscore there. Use the arrow syntax and select controller dot and generate word. Awesome. So now we're just focusing on that variable. Next thing is we need to put in a builder. So right, builder, and here I can write in the variable we care about, which is, we'll call it generate, and now I need to cut all of this out and place it inside the builder. And return this, so I write return. Alright, awesome. So this builder is going to return the safe area down, and now we need to put in some basic logic to say if generate is true, in that instance we want to call the generate word method. We are now listening to that variable and calling that method when we want to generate a new word. Then after we have called that word, we then need to set generate back to false. So up here we use provider again and just select request word, and this time pass in false. So we reset that back to false. So that is almost coming together. Next up is we need this to run when this first runs. So we're not using init state anymore. So back here in the controller, instead of saying this is starting off as false, we can initialize this to true. Alright, so now when this first runs, it's going to listen. It's going to say, yep, this is true. It's going to call that method. It's going to generate a word, and then after it's done that, it's going to tell us how many letters are in that word, and then it's going to set request back to false. And lastly, we don't want that same word repeating itself, so let's remove it from the list after it's been chosen. So down here I'll write words, and I'll use the remove at function, and I'll pass in the index of R, which is how we originally selected the word from the list. And lastly, to avoid any errors, I'm going to set a check here to say if words is not empty. So to avoid this running when there's nothing in the list, otherwise we'll have an out of range error thrown. Okay, cool. So I think we're ready to test this. So let's do a hot restart. C, T, and let's put A. Alright, so we need to fix a couple of things. One is we need that message box to disappear, and the other problem is the draggable letters need to reappear. So let's fix those two issues. Firstly, the message box. After we have selected a new word, we want that message box to disappear, pop away. So we can use the navigator class to do that. So navigator.ofContext, and we can just call pop to pop it off. And the next thing is these draggables are not reappearing down here, these letters. And we can fix that by going to our drag, and here accepted needs to return back to false. So we need to listen to that generate word variable in the controller class to when we have generated a new word, and at that point accepted should always be false. So let's wrap the very top here in a selector. And again, we'll pass in the controller, and we want to listen to a bool, so of type bool. And controller, and we care about generate word. And now we need to put in the builder. And now let's cut all of this, place it inside the builder. So we return all this down here. And we can add in a basic if statement. If generate is true, then accepted returns to false. And before we test this, we need to make sure that in the controller, when we do create a new word, letters answered is also reset back to 0. Let's do a hot restart. And now we have Fox generated. F-O-X. We've got our pop-up box. New word. Cool. Lion. L-I-O-N. The last part to this puzzle in this section is we need the game to be able to restart. So let's do that. We'll go to a controller, and basically we can follow the same logic we have here, is we'll track how many words have been answered. Words answered, we'll set that to 0. And down here, each time letters answered equals total letters, we know that words answered should be increased by 1. So if words answered is equal to all words, then we know that everything is done. So we can create a bool here called session completed, and we'll set that to false. But down here we know that it's true. Alright, so at that point in time we're changing session completed to true. And now we need the message box to reflect that. So let's go to our message box, and instead of just returning new word and well done, we'll return some different text. So we'll come down here and I'll write string title, and we'll return well done. That'll be our default. And then I'll write string button text, and we'll write new word. We need a condition, so I'll create one up here. Final bool session completed. So we need to pass this in, and we want this to be a required argument. So required, and we'll use this keyword to reference session completed. So now if we pass in session completed as true, then instead the message box should say all words completed, and the button text will also say replay. Alright, so we're updating the text, so let's update here. So instead of writing this in, we'll pass in title, and down here on the button text I'll pass in button text. And we need to come to our controller and pass that in. So here we'll pass in that session completed there. So at that point, when we run show dialog, that'll pass in as true if all the words answered equal all the words here. Alright, and I'm going to do a hot restart. Cool. Okay, so now we need to reset the variables, so when we do restart the game. So I'm going to create a method called reset, and at this point we know that the session is not completed. We've restarted a new session. Words answered should go back to 0, and we want to set generate word to true, because this will be the first time we rerun when we restart, so we want to generate a new word. Alright, so almost there. Now we need to call this reset, and we need to update the code in the button. So when the button is pressed, the onPressed function runs. We need to update the code here. So if session completed is true, then first of all we need to reset those variables. So we'll use provider to call that method we just created, provider of context, pass in the controller. We want to set listen to false and reset here. So here I will write navigator of context and I will select push replacement, and here I'll pass in the material page route and we'll push on the home page. So when the user taps the button, it'll first reset the variables, and then the navigator is going to help us push back on the home page, which will reinitialize the original list. Otherwise, so else, we just want to do what we've done before and generate a new word. Alright, so let's give this a whirl. I'm going to press hot restart. So, P-I-G, can't dismiss that message box. I'll click new word, L-I-O-N, new word, F-O-X, last word, nice and easy, cat. All words completed. Cool, so our message box is popping up with the new text, and let's press replay. Cool, and now we got pig popping up. So we're now able to replay the game. So the game will always have built-in randomness every time it runs. Next part is let's add in some images, and I want to add those images in the green part of the UI. So I'm going to go to home page. I want to add in the images here. So first of all, we need to import the image assets, which will be a cat, pig, fox and lion. Copy those, and up here I'm going to go assets, create another directory called images and paste those in. Awesome. Now let's add those to the pubspec YAML down here in images. Uncomment this out by control /. Firstly, the indentation must be 2, 1, 2, bring that back 1. And here I need to write in the path, assets, images. Now I can write each one out one by one, but a better way to do that is just to delete that and leave it with a /, and now I can access any of those images in that folder. So let's do that. I need to run pubget. Cool, let's go to home page. Here I will put child, image, asset, and then put in the path, assets, images. I'll put in drop word, and then I need to write PNG. So if that word is lion in this case, it should pull up that image. Press that lightning bolt, and cool, we now have our lion popped up. Awesome, so we now have an image appearing in the app. Next up is I want to make this app a little bit more lively, and to do that I want to apply some animation. Specifically, I'd like the characters and the images to spin onto screen. One way I can do that is by writing the animation code everywhere that we need it. However, that's a little bit inefficient. In this case, I will put the animation in its own stateful widget and then reuse it throughout the app where we need it. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go to lib new Dart file, type fly in animation, which is the name I'll call this stateful widget, stful fly in animation. I'll import the material library. And the first thing is I want the stateful widget to take in a child that will wrap around and animate. So I'll write final widget child, and up here we want this to be a required this child. So this must take in a child which is of type widget, but basically any object that can wrap around and animate. Now down here in the state class, the first thing I will write is animation controller, which is going to be our controller, our driver of the animation. It can start the animation and it can also reverse the animation. And it produces a value by default from 0 to 1 every frame, so we can use that value to help run the animation. And I'm going to initialize this in the init state, so I'm going to use the late keyword here. Whenever we use an animation controller, we should sync it up with a ticker to help it run. So to do that, I'm going to, up here in the class definition, mix it in with a ticker. So I'll write with single and then choose this long word, single ticker provided state mixin. And then to sync it up in the init state, I'll initialize the controller, and next to vsync I will write this, and that'll sync up the animation controller with the ticker. And the next thing that we need to pass in is the duration. So I'll pass in a duration of, say, 800 milliseconds here. Okay, cool. So we got the animation controller set up. We should now allow this controller to be disposed, so we are not wasting memory. I'll write controller.dispose, so I can use the dispose method on the state class to dispose of this animation object when we don't want it anymore. So next up, let's actually create the animation. Now the first thing I want to do is have these letters spin around, so I can use an animation out of the box in Flutter called rotation transition. And the first thing I need to pass in is the turns, which is an animated object of type double, and we can pass in the animation controller object here because that derives from an animation of type double, so that'll work. And also a child, and we want to animate the child that we passed in to the stateful widget. So to access it down here in the state class, I'll type widget.child. So now actually to rebuild this animation, each frame, we need to wrap this in an animated builder. And here we need to pass in the controller and have the builder return the rotation transition. Cool, so next step is I want to run this animation, and to do that I'm going to create a ball called animate. So we can run this animation when we want. This will be required, this.animate, and down here in did update widget, I can write if widget.animate, then let's run the controller. So this did update will be prompted to run when we pass in a value to the stateful widget, and here I can type in controller.forward to get the animation to run. So we can pass in animate. If we pass in false, the controller won't run, but if we pass in true, the controller will run. Now to make sure the controller can always run, when we pass in a value of true to animate, I'll set controller.reset. So it always resets back to 0, and then it will run to 1. And one other thing is I'll add controller is animating. So if the controller is animating, then we don't want the controller to restart the animation to interrupt the current animation. So now when we pass an animate to true, the controller will run forward, and then we should see the widget spin around. So let's test this. I'm going to go to home page. First I'll wrap around the drag. So here, wrap with widget, and I'm going to wrap with a fly in animation, and I'm going to pass in true. So every time this build method runs, it's going to pass in true. That'll trigger the did update widget, and if animate is passed in as true and the controller is currently not animating, the controller will first reset itself back to 0, then run forward. So let's test this and do a hot restart. Cool, and we can see the letters are animating, doing a 360 turn. So let's try that once more. Now let's go to a new word, and it should animate when we generate a new word. Awesome, so we can see the letters are spinning around. Now I also want the letters to fly in on screen. So to do that, I'm going to use another built-in widget to Flutter, animation widget. So instead of returning the widget.child, instead I'm going to return scale transition, and that'll do basically all the work we need it to do. So scale also needs to take in an animation of type double, so we can pass in the controller again, and here I'll put the child. So now the child of the rotation transition is a scale transition, whose child in turn is the widget that we're animating. So now if we do a hot restart, cool, we can see the letters are animating onto screen, so that is looking really good. So this scale is going from 0 to 1, and 1 being the size that we've got, and 0 being a size of nothing. So we're almost there. I want to improve this a little bit though. I want the spin to be random. So I want it to sometimes spin clockwise, and also to be able to spin anti-clockwise. So I could reverse the controller. There's a reverse method on the controller too, and that'll reverse it from 1 back to 0. However, in this case, that'll muck up with the scale transition because we want that to go from 0 to 1. So what I can do is create another animation object of type double and use that to either animate from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. So I will type in here late animation of type double, and I will name this rotation animation, and here in the init state I will write rotation transition, and I'm going to set this to a tween of type double, and we need to pass in the beginning value and the end value. So in this case I want this to be able to flip, so I'm going to create some variables here of type double. I'll call this begin 0, default value of 0, and end with a default value of 1. And now we need to find out a way to flip these. So to do that I'm going to use the random class, import the Dart math library, and on random I can select next bool, so this will either return true or false like flipping a coin. I'll store this in a variable named flip, and now I can say if flip is true, let's flip it. So begin will actually be 1 and end will actually be 0, and now I can pass these in. And here to make the tween work, I'm going to select dot animate. Now I'm not going to pass in the controller directly, which will drive this. Instead I'm going to pass in another animation object, which is the curved animation, and this will allow me to set a curve. So instead of the animation running from 0 to 1 in a linear fashion, this will now have a curve on it, which will look a little bit cooler. So here I can select a heap of curves by typing in curves, and then I can access a whole lot of different types. So in this case I'm going to select ease in out sign, and here in the parent I am going to pass in the controller, and now we can use the values from rotation animation, which could run from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. So let's come down here and replace this with the rotation animation. So we're still passing in an animation of type double. We've just changed it. Now if we do a hot restart, let's see if this works. Awesome. So we can see some letters are flipping clockwise and some anti-clockwise. Let's slow this right down. Awesome. So that's looking really good. Let's do it one more time. Cool. Alright. I'll set this back to 800. In fact, I'll make it a little bit faster at 600. And I'm now going to wrap the widgets that I want to animate. So I want to animate this image and also these top containers here. So in the home page, this is going to be easy to apply. Right click, wrap with widget, wrap with our flight in animation. So I'll pass in true here, and up here I'm going to wrap that with a fly in animation, animate, pass in true. Now let's test this. Cool, so we can see all the widgets are flying onto screen, spinning in random directions. Next up is I want to import a progress bar. I want to do that using a linear progress indicator, another built-in widget in Flutter, and I want to place that in the pink area of the UI. So first of all, I'm going to place this in its own stateful widget. So new Dart file, I'll call this progress bar, stful progress bar, import the material, and now I'm going to return a linear progress indicator. And I'm placing this in a stateful widget because I want to animate the progress bar. So first of all, in the linear progress bar, we can pass in a value, and that value will represent how filled up the progress bar is. So for example, if we pass in 0.5, the progress bar should be half filled up. So now let's place this progress bar in our home page, and I want to place it in that pink container. So I'll come down here, child and progress bar. Cool. Okay, so now let's update. Alright, and now we can see our progress bar at 50%. So let's come back here. Now this value in our linear progress indicator, we want this to update dynamically based on how many words have been answered. So firstly, we'll go back to our controller And up here I'm going to create a new double, %completed, and I'm going to set that at 0 to start off with. And then each time a word is answered, we should increase that. So %completed should be equal to words answered divided by all words dot length. And then when we restart the game, we will set %completed equal to 0. So to reset that. Okay, so let's go back to progress bar stateful widget. And now we need a way to listen to that value. So I would like to do that using provider. So I'm going to wrap the linear progress indicator within a selector. And then I'll pass in the controller, and also the type of the variable we want to listen to is of type double. I'll pass in a double there. And now we want to select the value that we care about. So first I'll import provider and also import the controller. And now we can select the value because we only want this to listen to one value, and that is the %completed. And now I need to change this into a builder. We'll return a linear progress indicator. So now the selector can listen to changes in the value. So let's replace that with %, and now we should be able to see this update. So let's do a hot restart. So spell the word pig. Cool, and now we can see that 0.25 complete. And we'll do fox. Awesome, so that's 50% complete. Okay, so now that it's working, let's improve it by adding some animation. So the first thing I will do is set up some animation objects. So I will set up an animation controller to drive our animation. And whenever I set up an animation controller, I should sync it up with a ticker. In this case, I'm going to select the single ticker provided state mixin because we only need one ticker. And now in the init state, I'll go controller, vsync this, so that'll link it up with the single ticker provided state mixin to help the animation run. And then I'll pass in a duration. I'll put in 800. Okay, now I've set up an animation controller. I should practice good housekeeping and dispose it when we don't need it. So I'll write controller.dispose. Cool. Okay, so now we've got animation object set up. I'm also going to set up another animation object, and that's going to run the animation between the two different values, because the values are not going to run from 0 to 1. They may run from 0 to 0.25, from 0.25 to 0.5, and so on. So I'm going to create an animation of type double. I will name this animation, and here I'll first initialize it. So animation, I'll set it to a tween of type double, and I'll have a begin, and this has a begin and an end. And at this point the begin and end is going to change. So we might have 0.25 to 0.5. So let's create a couple of doubles to represent those changing values. Double begin, set that to 0, and end, set that to 0. So when it starts off, the begin and end will be 0. And here we can pass in begin and end, and now we need to call animate to get this to work. Instead of passing in the animation controller directly, I'm going to pass in a curved animation. So firstly at the parent I'll add in the controller, and then curves elastic in out. Alright, so now we've set up our controller, our animation. Now we need to get this to work. So down here, the first thing is the end value should be set to whatever the % is. So for instance, in this example, the first word will mean we read a value of 0.25, so the end value is 0.25, and now we need to animate to that point. And here we need to reinitialize that animation object. So we'll do that by grabbing this and pasting this down here. This will create a new animation set to these new values. After we've done that, we want to run the controller. So we'll go controller.forward, and before that we should make sure the controller is reset back to 0, because the controller will run from 0 to 1. So make sure that's reset. So while the controller runs from 0 to 1, this animation is going to tween from the beginning to the end over the duration we passed into the animation controller. After the animation control has finished running, we should set the begin value as the same as the end value, because the animation has then finished at that point, so the beginning and end should both be the same. So we got that set up. So next, let's replace this %, and we'll replace that with the value of the animation. So for instance, the first one is going to animate from 0 to 0.25 over the duration of the controller, which is 800 milliseconds. And once that's completed, the begin value will be reset to the end value, and then we can run that again. Cool. Now to actually get this to update, to rebuild, we need to wrap the linear progress indicator in an animated builder. And here, for animation, set the controller object to the animation, so the animated builder will rebuild while the controller is producing new values from 0 to 1. And then this needs to be changed to a builder here, so it will quickly rebuild the frames and show the progress bar updating. So L-I-O-N, cool, P-I-G, awesome, C-A-T, F-O-X, cool. Now I'm going to put in a couple of safeguards. The first one is if controller is not animating, then we can run this code. And that'll stop the slider from animating, and then if the user clicks new word really quickly, it'll upset that animation. So that'll stop that. And also, when begin is equal to 1, we know that the slider has finished. So if the user restarts the game, let's just make sure that the begin value also returns back to 0 and the end value is also at 0. Finally, I want to make the linear progress indicator a little bit prettier. Firstly, I want to give it some rounded edges. To do that, I will right click and wrap it with a clip rect, which creates a rounded rectangular clip. Let's do that. Under border radius, I'll type border radius dot circular and pass in 60. Cool, so we can see the rounded edges. And I also want to put that in some padding. Right click, wrap with padding. Cool. And I also want to update the color. In the linear progress indicator, I'll select a color of amber and then a background color of gray. Alright, so let's spell a word. Cool. And let's spell another word. C-A-T. And this is the last word. So now we can restart. Cool. The next thing I want to do is add in some basic audio to the app. And to help us do that, I'm going to use a package called Audio Players. So I'll first grab the dependency at pub.dev, grab this here, and then I need to add this into pubspec.yaml. Just down here, run pubget. Cool, so we should now have access to audio players. Next thing is I will paste in the actual audio assets we want to play. So in this case, I just want 2 simple sounds that I've downloaded from freesound.org. Create a final directory, name this audio, and paste in the audio assets. Now back in pubspec.yaml, I need to reference those. So I'll come down here to assets and I'll write assets audio and run pubget. And now I should be able to use that audio. So this is quite simple. If I go to the controller, I'll click get dependencies here. I want to play the 2 sounds, correct 1 and correct 2. Each time the user drops a letter successfully, correct 1. And then when the whole word is spelt correctly, correct 2. So down here where we call increment letters, so firstly, if letters answered equals total letters, at this point I want to play correct 2. So I can just type audio cache, that'll import the audio players, and then I can use the play method and I can type in the path. The prefix already has assets, so I just need to type audio correct 2.mp3. However, if we're just answering a letter and the word is not completed, so it's not the last letter, we'll just come down here to the if statement, and here I will type audio cache and this will play a local file we've put into the project, so not a file from the web. Play, and again put the path in, so audio correct 1.mp3, and now I'll do a hot restart. So we've got cat C A, cool. I'll just turn that up a little bit. L I O N. Alright, awesome. Alright, awesome. So we've only got one more step in this project, and that is to make a heading for the game. So I just want to make a very simple title that says spelling bee, and have a bee that spins around each time a letter is successfully answered. So first of all, I'm going to go to the home page, and I'm going to wrap that with a sized box. And now I'm going to update this container. So I'm going to decorate the container. Use a box decoration. First thing is I'll give some color. So I want the color to be amber, keep a consistent look. And then I also want the edges to be curved. Cool. Alright, awesome. And I want to wrap that in some padding. Say 12. Okay, cool. Now let's put in a title. So I want the title, and I also want a logo of a small bee next to it. So let's do the title first. Because I want two things side by side, I'm going to use the row widget. So come down here, child, row, and two children. So the first child will be some text that will say spelling bee, and let's apply the text theme. So by using theme of, and also because this is in a row, I'm going to wrap these in an expanded, which will force it to fill up all the available space. And I'll put two children, so at the moment they're going to evenly split that title area. So I'll create another one, child, and this will be where we'll put the image. So I'll just put a size box at the moment. I'll replace that shortly. Okay, so then let's update that. Now the text is overlapping, so that doesn't look too good. So to fix that, I'll right click, wrap the widget, and wrap that with a fitted box, and now we can see that it fits in the box. I'm also going to put that in some padding. Cool. And now I want to make this one larger, so I'll put that at 2, and here I'll use a flex value of 1, so this will be 2/3. Let's increase that padding. I'm going to use from, and then for each area, so the left I'm going to put in 18, the top I'll put in 2, the right I'll put in 2, and the bottom I'll put in 2. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. And then in the other area I want to put a bee that every time a letter is answered correctly it will spin around. I'm going to do that now. First I need to import a bee asset, so an image. So I'll paste this in here for images. So we have a bee, and here I'll replace that size box with an image asset, and then I'll put in the path, which is assets images b.png. Now let's update, and I might need to do a hot restart. So I've done a full restart, and now we can see the bee. So let's also put the bee in some padding. It looks a little bit close to the edges. Alright, that bee, in fact I'll make that padding 18. Alright, cool. So now we have our title. So now I want the bee to do a spin, a 360, every time the user successfully drops a letter where it should go. Now I don't want it to scale in, which is what my current animation does. So let's amend it to allow us just to have the rotation. So I'll go to fly in animation, and here I can create a new ball, and I can name this remove scale, and here I can make this a nullable type, which means we don't have to pass this value in. If we don't pass it in, then it'll be equal to false. So we're going to say if we don't pass it in, then we don't remove the scale, but if we do pass in true, then we do remove the scale. And then down here we return a scale transition, but instead we can go widget, remove scale, and then use the ternary operator and say, if we want to remove the scale, then let's just directly return the object we're animating. However, if remove scale is false, then let's return the scale transition. Now it's giving us an error, and that's because we can't have a nullable type here in our condition. So to get around that, I'm going to use 2 question marks, and that's going to say if this value was null, then by default it's going to be false, and that will allow us to use a nullable type as a condition. So if this is false, then this will return. By default it will be false. However, if this is explicitly passed in as true, then we're going to directly return the child and not the scale transition. And I want this animation to run when a letter is successfully dropped on its drag target. I'm going to go to controller and create another bool, and this will be called letter dropped, and I'll set this to false, and then I'll create a method to work with it named update letter drop and required bool dropped. So letter dropped will be equal to dropped, and then notify listeners. And now up here, when a letter is answered successfully, I'll call that method. So update letter dropped, and I'll pass in true. Alright, so now let's go to the home page. We'll wrap the B with the fly in animation, and we'll pass in remove scale true. So we want to remove the scaling and animate. So here we'll use selector and provider to listen to that new variable we created. So I'll wrap that with a selector, take in the type controller, and also a bool, because we'll be listening to a variable of type bool. Selector letter dropped, and then this needs to be a builder that'll return that fly in animation. Cool. And then animate can be set to dropped. Now if we run this will work the first time, but then dropped will always be true, so we need a way to reset it. So let's run it and have a look. So we drop L, cool, that B spins around. If we drop I, the B does not spin around. So what we need to do is reset dropped back to false after it turns true. So we can do that by using a callback. So let's go back to the fly in animation, and we can create a callback here. So I can create a function, and again I'll make this nullable so it does not need to be passed in. We'll call this animation completed, and here I'll write this dot animated completed, and down here after the controller runs we can call that function and create a callback. So we can go widget dot animated completed, and we can call that there. And because this is a nullable type, we need to add the null operator there. So if that is not null, we can then call that function, and at that point we know the animation has run. Okay, so let's go to the home page and use that. So animation completed, and then we'll create a method that it calls, and we can just say animation completed, and here we want to reset letter drop back to false. Provider of context listen false, and we'll pass in the controller, and now we can call that method we created and we'll set that to false. Okay, so let's put that in here, that method. So animation completed. So when the animation is completed, this will be called, this function, which will then use provider. It will call the controller, call that method, which will set drop back to false. So hot restart, and we have an error, and I need to wrap this in a future to give it a bit of delay, otherwise it's going to call immediately. So here I can write duration milliseconds, and I'll put in 200, very small delay, and then I'll put in this call here. Okay, So now that future is giving this a slight delay, otherwise this animation completed will be called immediately back. So let's test this now. L I O N. Awesome. Okay, so by using the delayed method on the future, we're able to create a very small delay and then reset that dropped back to false. If we reset it back to true immediately in that callback, it's going to throw an error. Cool. So the app is working and it's looking good. It's all running smoothly. So let's just fix up a few things. So a few cosmetic changes. Firstly, I want to have a background of all blue, so not these placeholder colors here. So let's come through, remove these colors. So I'm going to remove this color here, and in fact I could just remove the whole container. And down here I could also remove this widget. Cool, so we don't need that color there. Down here I will also remove the container. I'll also remove this container. So remove all the unnecessary containers. Cool, so that looks a lot better. Now also keeping with the theme, I want to round the edges of these yellow containers here. So I'm going to go to the drop. I'm going to remove these print methods. And down here, I'm going to add in some decoration. So I need to remove the color there. So I'll add it in the box decoration. And I'm going to go border radius dot circular, and pass in 12. And here I need to put back in the color, so colors.amber. Cool, so now we have some curve on the boxes. Last thing is, let's change the background color. And up here, I'm going to wrap the column in a stack, and I'm going to wrap it first in a column, because that'll create the children, and then I'm going to change it to a stack. Otherwise, it's a real pain to put in these brackets. I'm going to create a background color, so here, put in a container, and colors of, put in light blue, do a hot restart. Awesome. I also want to have that title pushed down a little bit. I think it's a little bit high. So up here I am going to create another expanded, and I'll just return a size box, and I'll put in a flex of 1. Alright, and I'm just going to increase these by a little bit. I'm going to make that 3, and I'll make this 4, 4, 4, and now let's hot restart. Cool, okay, I think that looks pretty good. Let's test it. P, I, G. Awesome, can't tap away that box. New word, C, A, T. Awesome, new word, L, I, O, N. Getting pretty good at my spelling here. And final word, fox, F, O, X. Awesome, all words completed. Okay, awesome, so this project is finally finished. I hope this has helped you pick up a few pointers or ideas for your own project. I'm sure there are plenty of ways to refine the code or improve the app, perhaps add in some clues for the user, or you could add in a database to expand the game. But at the moment, it's a good simple game that works. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe if you found it helpful. See you next time. Cheers.